Hey everyone, Mr. Sujano here, your source for gaming, tech, emulation, and open source news. Let's get started. Alright, we'll kick things off talking about Nintendo Switch emulation with Ryujinx, and Tomb Raider 1-3 Remastered has just released, and it already runs on Ryujinx. However, things are not perfect just yet. For example, in version 1.1.1194, it fixes a crash when starting the game. But in the emulator, you still need to enable the Ignore Missing Services option for the game to run. In version 1.1.1196, it fixes a crash when changing the game on the selection menu. And in version 1.1.1197, it fixes some lighting issues. So if we take a look at the compatibility tracker on GitHub, we can see under Tomb Raider 1-3 there are some open issues. And this is with the latest version here, and we can see that Tomb Raider is still a little bit dark. There is crashing when closing the game out. And overall, it is running, but it's still far from perfect. And for those of you wondering about Tomb Raider on Android with Yuzu, there appear to be some cropping issues. However, this may be a rare Mali win. Someone here with a Mali GPU says Tomb Raider Remastered works like a charm. Again, it's really dark. Maybe it's just the game. And as for Yuzu on PC, I haven't seen any Tomb Raider specific fixes just yet. But I have seen some people report that the game seems to be running fine, but the graphics are kinda too dark. So I don't know here, maybe Tomb Raider is just dark. If you've played this on Yuzu or Ryujinx, let me know in the comments below and let me know your experiences. Next up, we're talking about GameCube and Wii emulation on Android with Dolphin Fork Forge Emulator. And Forge Emulator is back. It's called Forge Emulator Reborn or Remastered. I'll drop a link to the GitHub in the description below. At the time of filming, version 3.5 of Forge Emulator has just dropped. They say it's got a better frame rate, a redone UI, it supports more devices, and it's got a 32-bit remaster and even more. Now it's worth pointing out that Forge Emulator is a fork of Dolphin. It's not officially supported by Dolphin. On top of that, Dolphin does not support 32-bit builds. If you have a 32-bit Android device, Forge Emulator may be one of your best choices. At the same time, if you've got a 32-bit device, it's probably not going to run GameCube and Wii games very well. Next up, we're talking about Nintendo 64 emulation with Project64. And if you're using an old version of Project64, you may want to consider updating. So there's currently a security advisory on versions 1.6 and 1.7 of Project64. Apparently, they contain a security vulnerability that allows malicious ROM files to execute arbitrary code on your computer outside of the emulator. Now, at the time of filming, the latest version of Project64 is version 3.0.1, so feel free to update to that version. Alternatively, you can check out some great emulators like Simple64, Rosalie's Mupen GUI, or multi-system emulator Ares. Moving on, and we're talking about MAME on Android with MAME for Droid 2024, and it's got yet another update. This emulator has been very active. So version 1.9.5 just dropped, and we've got some new things. They've added media scraping, they've added MAME metadata resources, and they've added a custom build to sideload on MetaQuest devices. Moving on, and we're quickly talking about DOSBox Staging, and DOSBox Staging has just released version 0.81.0. So in this version, there's a whole bunch of bug fixes, improvements, and brand new features. For example, it now comes with built-in authentic CRT monitor emulation. Integer scaling options have been added, and they've also added in support for the 3DFX Voodoo 1. I'd argue this is a pretty big release, and I'll drop a link to the full changelog in the description below in the event that you wanted to go through it. DOSBox Staging is available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Next up, we're talking about PCXSense, a program that lets you use your DualSense controller in any game on your computer via X-input emulation. So beta version 0.7 has just dropped, and they've added in support for the DualShock 4, so it's no longer limited to just PS5 controllers. They've added button remapping, they've added start select mapping to the touchpad, they've fixed a memory leak and even more optimizations. PCXSense is 100% free, it's open source, and I'll drop a link to it in the description below. Next up, we're talking about Xbox, and today was the updates on the Xbox business. I'll drop a link to the podcast in the description below, and feel free to check it out. Now, I watched this podcast, and I have some very interesting takeaways. The first one here is a quote from the Xbox president, Sarah Bond. She says they're working on delivering the largest technical leap you will have ever seen in a hardware generation. I am very curious to see what they're going to unveil. The second thing here is in regards to game libraries and preservation, and Phil Spencer essentially says they want to respect the investments you've made on previous generations and carry them forward to the next generation. I don't know how that one's going to pan out. I don't know if it's actually going to happen. But he's also trying to make sure that saves carry over, so I'm very curious to see what happens here. The third thing here, and this one should be a surprise for nobody, they're still working on bringing franchises to other platforms. And the last thing on the podcast is I was surprised they actually talked about Palworld being the largest third-party release ever on Game Pass. Moving on, and we're quickly talking about Linux, and if you've got some artistic skills, you may want to use them for the Noble Numbat Wallpaper competition being held by Ubuntu. So at a high level here, they're looking to assemble a collection of community-based wallpapers to feature in their next release. And there are a few different categories: mascot theme, digital abstract art, nature, and other. And no, you can not use AI. Next up, we're quickly talking about Fortnite on Linux. And although Fortnite is not officially supported on Linux, it's not stopping some people from trying to get it to work. I'll drop a link to John Lagostini's video in the description below, and feel free to check it out. He can't boot the game, but getting it just to this part is pretty impressive. And as for official support for Fortnite on Linux, don't hold your breath. Here's a quote from Epic CEO Tim Sweeney, and this is over on The Verge when he was interviewed. Why is Fortnite still not playable on Steam Deck? And here's the answer. If we only had a few more programmers, it's the Linux problem. I love the Steam Deck hardware. Valve has done an amazing job there. I wish they would get to tens of millions of users, at which point it would actually make sense to support it. In my opinion, that's a pretty poor answer. I mean, if some people can get Fortnite running to this point on Linux with zero support, I don't see how it would be a lot of effort to get Fortnite running on Linux, and I'd argue they'd stand to make a few bucks from Linux users. But what do I know? And speaking about games on different systems, next up we're talking about Dreams, a current PlayStation exclusive. And today I was very surprised to see Dreams PC trending on Twitter. Now, it was recently reported that the PC and PS5 ports for Dreams were canceled, and it's a very weird situation. I'll drop a link to the article in the description below, and feel free to check it out, but apparently the PC and PS5 ports were close to completion. And then the developers decided to drop it and move on. It appears there's a lot of people not happy with that situation, and they're trying to entice the developers to finish the game and release it. Let me know your thoughts about this one in the comments below. Would you be excited for Dreams on PC or even PS5? And speaking about PC ports, next up we're quickly talking about the unofficial Spider-Man 2 PC port. And this one to me is crazy. There's apparently a patch that has just been released for this thing, fixing around 200 textures and shaders, and even adding support for spectacular lighting. I'm curious to see what happens here. If this thing keeps being maintained and updated, I think the actual developers of this thing for the PC are going to have their hands full trying to make their product better than the unofficial port. And last up here, I forgot to mention this in yesterday's video. I put it in the pinned comment, but at the same time, here it is again. FlatOut is currently free on GOG, so feel free to pick it up. But anyways, that is all I've got for you in this one. Straight to the point, all stuff and one fluff. We talked about a bunch today. Let me know your thoughts about absolutely any of it in the comments below. If you liked this video, leave a like. If you didn't like this video, leave a like. Hit that subscribe button, check out my other videos. Don't tempt fate, save your state.